to the Oxygenaddict Triathlon Podcast, brought to you every week by our sponsors, PrecisionHydration.com.
Leaders in triathlete sweat testing and hydration with multi-strength electrolytes that match how you sweat. You can get 15% off with the code Oxygenaddict15.
We're also brought to you by Team Oxygen Addict at team.oxygenaddict.com,
which offers event-specific training plans, coaching guidance from Coach Rob Wilby.
Hello, that's me.
And supportive teammates in a private Facebook group.
And welcome to the show, which is 1st of August today, as we're recording. Beautiful sunny day outside where I am. Helen, how about you?
Are you having a laugh?
Yeah.
I was gonna say.
I drove back from Sourdough yesterday in the hardest rain I've ever seen in my life. I was doing about 5 miles an hour for 10 minutes because it was just unreal.
I was about to, I'm sitting here in, when you get out of the shower after you've done a run or something, you're just like, shorts and a t-shirt. I was practically shivering, drinking tea, thinking, my God, it's pretty much winter.
Yeah, it's pretty harsh, isn't it?
Yeah. I went out on my bike, Rob, yesterday. And
you had a big ride, didn't you, yesterday?
I did. I had a big ride. And I had seen the weather was going to be sunshine and showers, but more showery as it got later on. So I thought, I might be really lucky. I might just miss it. As soon as I left the front door, rain, right? Brilliant. Okay, then it dried off and the sun did come out and stunning views. I did 2 loops, and both loops, if you know this part of the world, took me up to the Cat and Fiddle. All right.
Okay.
First time up to the Cat and Fiddle. Glorious, sunshine, nice. Second time, up to the Cat and Fiddle, perfect, beautiful. As soon as I got to the Cat and Fiddle, I was like, oh my God, these mental dark clouds everywhere. And you could just see in the distance the rain. I was like, oh no, that's where I'm heading.
No.
And as soon as I dropped off down from the Cat and Fiddle, the heavens opened. It wasn't just rain, it was hail, and I was like, sugar, it's very cold. And I had to whip my jacket out of my pocket, and oh God, it was miserable. The last, 20 minutes probably, and then again.
You love it.
Oh, I hated it. As soon as I got a bit lower then the sun came out again. I was like, this. And then I thought, you know what? It's probably going to be like this in Tenby. I've just got to embrace it.
Yeah, exactly.
I hate it.
It's hard to describe the different kinds of microclimates you can get in the different valleys in the Peak District unless you've experienced it, isn't it? I remember so many times leaving home just with shorts and a short sleeve top on and riding over into one of the valleys and looking up and thinking, the temperature just dropped by 15 degrees. I'm now freezing and shivering and I have to drop down the other side of this on the way back. It's really quite something. Yeah, I've been there, mate. I feel for you. It's all good though. Woman up.
Yeah, whatever. If I could get 7 hours of rain on the bike in Tenby.
Yeah, easily.
I did think that. I thought, oh.
Yeah.
Then I thought, what would I wear? I honestly thought, what would I wear if it was in for 7 hours of Welsh rain?
I think you've got to be very careful, a person like you, because you really suffer from the cold, don't you?
Yeah.
And there are people who can go out and race in the cold and the wet just wearing a tri-suit and they're fine and they're not affected by temperature. I think if you're going out over that kind of terrain for 7 hours, you've got to approach it like, well, what would I wear at home? Would I have a rain jacket with me? And that's obviously, for a person of your ability, it's really going to affect your... there's no two ways around it. It's going to affect your bike split, isn't it, if you've got to put a rain jacket on and it's flapping around you. So it is super, super hard. It's like when you see the pros racing in the UK and wearing 2 tri-suits so they can try and stay warm but still be really, aerodynamic still. It's a really tough call.
There you go. That's one for pondering. That's when you start manically checking the weather, isn't it? 3 weeks out, thinking this is really quite pointless, but I'm going to do it anyway.
You should have a look. I saw an advert for Hoob the other day, and they were making a specific skin suit thing for the bike for the people who were racing Norseman.
Interesting.
Aimed at people who are going to be freezing cold on the bike. It's got a windproof front on it or something, but it's still a skin suit. So maybe that's the way. Bit of free advertising for Hoob there as well. Welcome, guys. Right, shall we move into today's results then, H?
I think we should do, Rob. Let's do that. Yes.
Here we go. All right, so results are sponsored by Precision Hydration, who this week would like you to sign up for their newsletter. If you can follow the link in our show notes or on the website, go and sign up for the newsletter. If you then place an order this week and you're a new customer, you'll get 20% off. If you're not a new customer, you can always get 15% off with our code Oxygenaddict15. So if you're not a customer yet, get in there with the code that's linked through into our show notes. I've lost what I'm talking about there, Hells, completely.
Go to the show notes. If you're a new customer, there's a 20% off code. Yeah, sign up. There's 20% off.
Brilliant.
If you're not a new customer, then use Oxygenaddict15.
Happy days. Right. First results from the weekend are from Ironman Canada, where there was only the pro women's field this weekend and a win for Lindsay Corbin.
Correct, because last weekend was the pro race for men only at it was Lake Placid, wasn't it?
That's right. So pros racing. Lindsay Corbin takes the win out, and Rachel Joyce down there in fourth place. She had a solid day out, but couldn't quite make the podium, could she?
No, and the reason that she was racing Ironman Canada was to try to get those final points that she needed to guarantee her Kona place in that July cutoff.
And did she need to be third to get it?
It was either second. I think it was either second or third. So yeah, Rachel,
shame.
Yeah, just missed out on that one. I think she said something like yesterday's race.
Did she not just race Boulder just really recently?
Correct.
Wasn't that long ago, was it? So I was looking at a bike time. Go on, sorry.
A tough day for me, but those happen in Ironman. Stings a bit. On the plus side, Whistler is an incredible backdrop for this race.
Pictures do look amazing on Slow Twitch, don't they? Really beautiful place.
Yeah. She says my body was just not feeling it, and at points I wondered how I would make it to the finish line.
I'll tell you what, though, we've got to keep it in perspective, because it wasn't all that long ago that you and I were having a conversation as we were running, and she was talking about getting back into swimming. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And it was like every workout I'm getting a little bit faster, and I've got to forget how fast I used to be because I'm just so far away from it. To get back to win Ironman Boulder and be on the verge of qualifying for Kona so quickly, pretty amazing. And she'll get there, won't she?
Oh yeah, she says down but not out, because she gave birth to Archie in September.
So it's not even a year yet, is it?
No. So it's,
Crazy.
I think it's inspiring. Definitely
yeah, absolutely.
Inspiring. So Rachel didn't quite get those points that she needed to secure that Kona slot in the July cutoff.
Yeah, that's a shame. She'll be back though.
Yeah, and the other person who is back, Rob, is, we mentioned at the very beginning there, Lindsay Corbin, who got the win at Canada. She's had a really tough couple of years. She has injury and then illness, and I know she tried to come back and then she felt that she came back too soon. So, and then that led to more injuries and I think burnout. So yeah, it's great to see Lindsay Corbin back. And her husband was tweeting during the race hilarious stuff. He's like, my wife's out the swim, like something like, my wife is first pack out the swim. I've never tweeted that before. That's amazing, or something along those lines. Quite entertaining.
You gotta love it. It's cute, isn't it?
It was funny. So Lindsay Corbin got the win in 9:17 ahead of Jen Annett of Canada in 9:24, and then Rachel McBride, who had been leading for a big chunk of that race, she finished in 9:27 in third, with Joyce back in fourth in 9:43.
Okay then, over next to Ironman Switzerland, where we had wins for Nick Castelline and Celine Schauer of Switzerland.
Yep, so it was Nick's first Ironman win, and for Celine Schauer, she pretty much won from the start, Rob. I mean, she was leading throughout, and the name who we were mentioning beforehand was Ronnie Schildknecht, who was sadly a DNF. He was going for his 10th win at Ironman Switzerland, but he had to pull out on the run with a muscle strain.
Oh, bless him, because it's been his race, hasn't it, for over a decade, really?
Yeah, he's just a bit like Cam Brown at Ironman New Zealand.
Yeah,
it's been his. It's absolutely been.
Nobody's taking my race away. Yeah, it must be. It must really feel like he owns it, mustn't it?
Oh, definitely. And people who line up against him probably... There's got to be a bit where you're thinking, Ronnie's on the start line.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, well, not this time. Unlucky Ronnie. Hopefully he'll be back. So results on the men's side, we had Nick Castelline from Australia in 8:13.28, just less than a minute outside the course record, actually. Rudy Wild of Switzerland in second in 8:20, and Jan van Berkel of Switzerland in third in 8:26.
Yep, and on the women's side, Celine Scherer took the win in 9:23 ahead of Tina Holst of Denmark in 9:37 and Martina Kuntz. It was her first pro race, Rob, in 9:40. Apparently she used to volunteer at, I think, Ironman Switzerland.
Oh, I love the idea of that happening to you one day, Hells. You racing pro at Bolton and being the local pro.
What?
Maybe one day.
I think that would be in a... That's never going to happen. I'll happily volunteer there and I'll happily cheer people on, but that's about as far as it will get.
It'd be such a nice story, though. It'd be such a nice story if you got to race pro.
Wouldn't it be a lovely story if, like, my mum did Ironman Bolton as a pro?
No messing from Helen what her intentions are there, then. Right, headed forwards into the Snowdonia Triathlon Festival, which had... I think they had 4 different races on, if you include the fact the Snowman Savage was made up of racing the sprint on one day and the full distance on the next day, Hells, because they had a half iron distance there as well, didn't they, this time?
Oh, I love it. You know what? It's always aim high, do really, really good triathlons. I have done Slate Man and I have done Sandman. I am yet to do the one which involves running up Mole Shabod. Mole Shabod is this mountain that you have to run up, Rob. I remember outdoor ed with school, going there in December and sledging down it. I mean, it is not a little mound. It is a mountain.
Proper mountain, isn't it?
It's a proper mountain.
Yeah.
So
lots of comments about it being, this must be the hardest half Ironman in the country. So they're doing something right with that legend triathlon half distance there.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
Cool. Well, I'll tell you what, because there's 3 races essentially, let's go through the winners. For the sprint triathlon, we had Thomas Nesham win and Hannah Bruce win the ladies' race.
In the Snowman Full, it was won by Llewellyn Holmes and then Dion Allen.
And in the Snowman Savage, it was Sam Green and Helen Talbot.
And then the Snowman Legend was Matt Dewhurst and Lara Hamlet.
6 hours 11 for the men's winner in a half Ironman. That's quite some challenging course, isn't it, right there? Fair play, guys. Fair play.
Wow.
Yeah, tough old course. Get yourself out there to Snowdonia to race, guys, if you're listening and you've never been there. It's a brilliant, beautiful location. Really, really good. Love that place.
Yeah, love it, love it, love it. And if you don't fancy quite such a mountainous one, then do check out their Sandman on Anglesey, which is usually September, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So you've still got time to enter that probably. I think it's mid-September. Yeah, check it out. September the 17th, I believe.
Ah, there you go. Yeah, do. It's great. And you can get a nice sea swim. And sometimes the sun even shines.
Yeah, I was actually in Snowdonia yesterday, and where we were, the weather was beautiful, but I kept looking over towards the mountains that had some black clouds on, so I suspect that they had their fair share of rainstorms coming through as well. So, yeah. Be interested to hear from people if you've raced that. Get on Twitter and tell us about it. We're at OA Tri Podcast on Twitter. We'd love to hear your comments. So let's jump over to Coach's Couch. Coach's Couch is sponsored by Team Oxygenaddict, which is our own triathlon coaching and supportive environment. So if you're interested in seeing how good you can get to be for next year, go over and check it out at team.oxygenaddict.com. You get a training plan tailored to your event race distance. And you also get the support of our teammates and me in a private Facebook group for training advice as well. So you can go over and check that out. So who have we got a question from this week, Hells?
Yeah, so Gareth Greaves got in touch, and Gareth asks, what's best for run pacing over middle to long distance? So then the second part of the question is cadence, heart rate, power or time? Okay, so we've obviously got a guy here who's got one of those new running power meters as well. The Strid thing.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting question because I think the reality for most people over middle to long distance is everyone's got an idea in the head of how fast they think they can run. And the reality is usually very different to that. So it almost is a moot point as to whether you're using cadence or heart rate or speed and distance or whatever to measure your pacing by. Because you're going to be basically trying to run as hard as you can for the whole event anyway. And a lot of people thinking, I'm not going as fast as I thought I could do. But I think the bigger question is, we've got some tools there that we can use to let us have the best run that we can relative to our fitness and how fresh we're feeling off the bike. So the first bit of advice is always going to be measure your effort really carefully on the bike so that you can deliver the run that you're capable of, because I'm sure the vast majority of triathletes, they leave a lot of their fitness out on the bike and they can't deliver the run that they're really capable of because they've biked a bit harder than they meant to, or they're actually capable of. Then in terms of when you're going out on the run in the middle and long distance, a real good way to go by is whether you're using speed and distance or heart rate to limit yourself for the first 10 miles of an Ironman or the first 5 miles of a half Ironman, and just get yourself to hold back, because it's going too fast too early that's usually the problem for people. Now, I'm a big fan of combining both speed and distance and heart rate as a metric on the run. So you'll have measured these in training. You'll have known what you're capable of doing on your long runs. You'll have hopefully seen how your heart rate and your speed are slightly different if you do a long run the day after a really long, hard bike ride as you would do in a race simulation weekend. And so you've got a good measure of how fast it's reasonable to go and hold yourself back to that pace. And you can also then keep track of heart rate. And we had some comments the other day as well from people saying, my heart rate's been going bonkers recently because I've been running in the heat. What do I do? How do I vary it with that? Well, keep a track of that as well. And if it's obvious that your heart rate is higher than it has been, then you can back the pace off a little bit, because what you're trying to do is measure your effort across that whole run distance so that you can do the best time you can do across the whole run distance, rather than blowing up and having to walk a big chunk of it. So I'm sure running with power is going to be really good at giving you accurate feedback in those ways as well, but you've got to have used it in training. It's a very new metric for people. I'm not using it with any of my athletes at the moment, so I'm not qualified to comment on that. But have something that you know that you can use to measure your speed and distance relative to how you've done in training, and use that as a guide to try and hold you back early on in the day. What have you used, Hells, in your successful long distance races that's helped you?
Probably a bit of time, definitely.
So using your watch and just thinking,
using my watch, yeah,
this is how long I think it's going to take me.
Yeah, and thinking, right, okay, but I'd say this works more on a flatter course, doesn't it? That, right, okay, I want to do X, therefore I need to run X minute miles, and I think it's a bit harder to do that over hillier terrain. Yeah, I think. Plus, it gets a little bit depressing as soon as you're thinking, "Oh, I've let it slip. Oh, I've let it slip again. Oh no."
Well, I think that's a really good point that you bring up, mate, because that's the reality for most people. I think most people think they're going to run faster than they do. Yeah. And you have to have a strategy for managing that idea of time is slipping away. And whether that's, all right, I was aiming for 4 hours and now I'm going to aim for 4:10. Now I'm going to aim for 4:20, whatever that is, as you readjust your targets. But it's got to be something that motivates you rather than makes you feel bad, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the thing. It's got to help you, because I think the temptation is, as you said, to go, oh, my time's gone out the window now. I mean, it's not even worth even trying anymore. So I think you give yourself your best chance of your best overall run by slowing yourself down a bit at the start of the run and just not getting too excited, really.
Because I know Ironman Bolton last year, I got way too excited because I think I could actually run. That was part of my early run excitement. And then, I don't know, I could see on my watch
at the end a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
But again, I think a lot of people are going to experience that. It's not just the fact that you'd been run injured going into that race. That's most people. Get off the bike, you're tapered, you're excited, you feel fresh. You probably feel fresher on that run than you have done in many of your long runs leading up to it. And you think, maybe I can actually go faster than that goal A time I'd set myself. And so what I would say is, just have a quiet word with that voice and say, well, let's make that decision at the 18-mile point rather than the 800-meter point.
Yeah. I have never used power running. I've never gone on cadence, but I guess I know now what feels comfortable and what feels about right. Heart rate, I don't go on it. Again, I know I've done enough runs now that I know my body now, and I know what feels hard. You've got a really good
feel of where your long distance run pace is at, haven't you? And
yeah. So in the long course Wales weekend, when I did the half marathon, I had a watch on purely because I guess I wanted the data afterwards, but I didn't look at it running at all because I wanted to see what it was like for me running a hilly course without any stats.
Yeah, gotcha.
So, yeah, and that was interesting. So I was sort of going on body, but then equally, I was running with someone else who did have a watch on, and yeah, did that help? Did that change anything? Probably one or two moments. She probably said, "Oh, ease off a little bit."
Interesting, yeah. But, so it's mainly been used to slow you down a little bit anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought that was a really interesting experiment. And then a lot of my gentle half-hour runs, I don't tend to take I often do not wear my heart rate monitor. Sometimes I don't take my watch. Obviously, there's a bit of you that likes to record it and tick the green box. But I don't often look at it, if that makes sense, on those easy runs. I just go with what feels easy.
Yeah, and I think, again, as an experienced athlete, you've done so many of those runs now that if we were having this conversation 3 or 4 years ago, it was all led by the Garmin. Do you remember? It was all about sticking to the pace. Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? And you've come all the way through that arc to get to the point where you instinctively know how it feels. And the only thing that we need you to do on race day is to hold you back a little bit because it feels different to how it is in reality because you feel really fresh and excited.
Yeah.
So hope that helps, Gareth. Essentially, it's going to come down to personal choice. But if you've got any more questions, fire them over to us at help@oxygenaddict.com. We'll help you out as much as we possibly can.
Right.
So shall we jump over into today's interview, Hells?
Who is on, Rob? Fill us in.
Today's interview is with Richard Melik. Now, you'll have heard of him because he runs the Freespeed bike fitting company down in London, freespeed.co.uk, and he is also the manager of Team Freespeed, who is our elite age group race team. And he also, as we'll find out, now manages a couple of pros, including Lucy Charles. So really interesting interview with him. Lots of stuff I asked him with the aim of our listeners learning things about whether or not they should move from a road bike to a tri-bike, whether tri-bikes are uncomfortable, as people give them this kind of this reputation of, and his top tips really for how you can do things to your own bike fit to improve your comfort and improve your aerodynamics. So let's go over to Richard Melik from Freespeed.
Okay, so it's my great pleasure to introduce you all to Richard Melik from freespeed.co.uk. Richard, thanks very much for joining us, and I'm really excited to have you on the show because you're pretty well renowned these days as one of the, if not the expert bike fitters in the UK with your company freespeed.co.uk. So great opportunity to get you on and pick your brains and see what we can learn about how most of us can improve our bike positions and get faster for less effort, really. So welcome to the show, mate.
Thank you very much, Rob. Great to be here. Big fans of the show. So that's, very exciting. Thank you.
Cool. So the first thing I want to talk about is obviously, if people haven't heard about you, Freespeed are a big bike fitting company based out of London, and you also have a Team Freespeed, which is an elite amateur race team as well. So we're going to cover both of those things. But let's start off with your fitting business. How did you end up getting into the bike fitting business in the first place?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one. When I was racing, I was very interested in my time trial bike position. And actually at that time, we're talking sort of 17 years ago, 15, 16 years ago, there was very little information about what constitutes a good time trial position. And I think pretty much the only information I could find, the only resource, was Dan Empfield in California. Is the sort of he's the owner of Slow Twitch, which some of your listeners may know, the forum, and he has a bike fit background. In fact, he designed arguably the first triathlon bike, the Quintana Roo, and had written a lot of articles on triathlon bike fit, which I sort of religiously pored over and gained as much information as I could. And then I think I was one of those sad people who kind of videoed themselves on a turbo and then sat down and looked at it and tried to work out what angles I was in. And so it really, it's grown from there. I then progressed to doing some coaching certificates and got my BTF level 2 coaching, and off the back of that started informally helping people with their bike positions, and at some point decided it could be something that I'd take further and enjoy and could be quite good at, and that at that point I investigated options and settled on becoming a Retul certified fitter. And I actually did, I believe it was the first Retul course in the UK about 7 or 8 years ago now. So yeah, that's the story of how I got into it, really. And I'm very lucky in that there seem to be very few bike fitters in the country, and particularly in London, who really have a triathlon heritage. Almost all bike fitters come from a road background. So I do very well with the triathlon market in London, particularly in London and the surrounding areas, because of my background in the sport. I know a lot of people in the sport. I know a lot of people at the local clubs, and have gained a bit of a reputation within London for particularly time trial bike fits, which I think, I'm friendly with a lot of other bike fitters, and I think most bike fitters that I speak to dread doing time trial bikes. I actually prefer doing time trial bikes. It's really something that I love, that side of things.
And I think that brings up a very interesting question here, because I think you and I are from similar backgrounds by the sounds of things, having pored over the tiny writing on Dan Empfield's original stack and reach data and trying to work out positions and things, and videoing yourself. It's all making me laugh and thinking, yeah, that's a similar thing. That it's worth, I think, talking a little bit about, for our triathlon audience, the difference between what they're going to find when they get a TT bike or a triathlon bike, the difference in why their position will be different on a TT bike to their road bike, and the difference that having a TT bike can make compared to just sticking a pair of clip-on bars on a standard road bike. Essentially, the change in position that will have and the benefits it has for a triathlete. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things. It's really something I talk about every day, and I see every day. I know this afternoon I've got someone bringing a road bike, and she said she's bringing tri bars to put on it. And actually, that solution is always a compromise, and it's a compromise in the bad sense of the word, really, because a road bike is very much designed for you to be sitting back on the bike. It's got a slack seat angle, so it's a 73, 74 degree seat angle. So your body position is rotated back and up. Whereas time trial bikes these days, almost all good time trial bikes have a seat angle of approaching 80 degrees, which means you can effectively rotate forward and down. So the thing I find most people are surprised about is just how comfortable they can be in quite a fast position, quite an aerodynamic position, because you're rotating forward and down, which means you're able to keep your hips much more open and actually resting on your upper arms through your elbows. So you're using your skeleton to support yourself rather than your core, which on a road bike you're predominantly using your core to keep your posture strong on a road bike. If you put clip-on tri-bars on a road bike, you're effectively just cramping that hip angle. You're lowering your back and creating stress through your lower back and cramping your hips. So not only will it be uncomfortable on the bike, it will also be less efficient to run off the bike. So I try and, I'm not the sort of person to just tell people as soon as they walk into the studio, start spending money. But the reality is, if you're serious about triathlon, particularly obviously non-drafting triathlon and the longer racing, then a TT bike is a no-brainer, because it really can help to get you in a fast position and a comfortable position.
I think you've summed that up perfectly there. I think it's something that we often get asked as coaches when people come new into the sport and they've got a nice road bike and they say, well, I'm just going to put some clip-ons on. And then when they start playing with the position, it's almost like they can't understand why they can't get as low as such and such a pro that they've seen, and why they feel so awful when they get off the bike, and why the back is so sore. And after usually the kind of curve goes, they tinker with the position for ages and then try somebody's TT bike and go, oh, that's what it's meant to feel like. And the difference really is night and day, isn't it, between having a well-fitted TT or tri bike and a road bike with clip-ons?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And something else that I see a lot is that, going back to my point about not many bike fitters coming from a triathlon background, is that I think most bike fitters see someone come in who wants to do an Ironman and think, well, that sounds horrendous, riding 112 miles and then running a marathon. So they put people in way too conservative a position. And actually, my sense is that most people of average flexibility can get in actually a very good position on a TT bike and be comfortable. I actually fitted a guy recently in his 70s who's buying his first time trial bike, and he's doing British age group racing, and we managed to get him very, very comfortable. So it's certainly possible. I think there's a definite perception that TT bikes are uncomfortable, and it's not the case. Now, having said that, if you're Brad Wiggins and you're going for the hour record, that kind of time trial bike position that kind of racing is almost meant to be uncomfortable. You're just looking for every ounce of speed for an hour to try and go as fast as you possibly can. And if he falls off the bike at the end of the hour, then that's fine if he's broken the record. But he doesn't have to run a marathon. So there are limits to how low you should go. And in fact, in a lot of cases, lower is not always better. It's something again I see a lot is people come in and they're desperate to go as low as they possibly can, but actually the lower you go at the front with your elbows, often the higher you have to hold your head up to see forwards, and by raising the front a little bit you can really shrug your head and keep it or shrug your neck and keep your head under your shoulders and out of the wind, and that's probably the biggest tip I'd give most people, is not to be too obsessed with going low at the front.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually, in that I was going to get on to asking you, and I guess we're here already, some of the common mistakes that you see people making in trying to do their own aero bike fits, and the things that you sort of change to make them faster. I guess that would be the first big one, is that lower isn't always faster. Would I be right in thinking that you spend a bit of time trying to get people effectively to have the smallest wind shadow, if you like? So if you look at them from the front, you want them to be almost as compact as possible and hiding bits out of the wind rather than necessarily as low as possible.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Although I always clarify that I don't have a wind tunnel here, unfortunately. So it's all a visual. It's my visual wind tunnel and my sort of eye for an aero position. But I think that the first priority is to get people's angles right and get them pedaling efficiently and get them comfortable on the bike, and then within the context of that, I try and get them as aero as possible. And I think particularly at the longer forms of the racing, at half Ironman and full Ironman, there's no point. There's no point being 10 millimeters lower if it means that you're having to sit up every 20 minutes to stretch your back. The net effect will be you'll be slower. So it's really finding a position they can keep and then making that as aero as possible. Going back to your point, if I can, about what do I see most often that people do wrong when left to their own devices, I think the key is, as I said at the start, is that the secret to a good TT position is to get forward on the bike. And I often find people buy a TT bike, then try and almost set it up mimic their road bike, and they have the saddle back because that feels familiar to them. The more rearward angle on the bike, which mirrors a road bike. So that's something often I can always tell when someone wheels a bike in, whether it's close or not to a good fit. And I think on that note, again, saddle choice is incredibly important. People often think, well, I'm comfortable on this saddle on my road bike, so I'm going to put it on my tri bike. But the position of your pelvis on a tri bike is so much more rotated forwards because your back is lower. That the function of a saddle is very different on a tri bike to what it is on a road bike. So it's not always the case that, and in fact, it's very rarely the case that the saddle you use on a road bike should work on a tri bike.
Mm. Something I often find as well is that people, it's almost like there has to be an expected period of things feeling a bit strange when you're changing from a road bike to a TT bike. And I've had people come to me and say, well, this just feels really weird, it's not going to be comfortable. And there's an acceptance that it's going to take a little bit of time to change from riding sitting upright on a road bike to being all the way forwards on a new saddle position with your elbows tucked underneath you, and almost that sensation of not being able to look very far down the road where you're going. That's something that takes people a lot of time to adjust to as well, isn't it?
It is, and it's definitely something. I mean, again, one of my big fears is when people say, I've just bought a new TT bike and I've got my Ironman in 3 weeks' time.
Yeah.
And and I do see that more often than I'd like, and it does take getting used to, and you're using muscles differently. There's an adaptation phase there, but I like to think that with a good position and with the angles right, it's not too long a phase of adaptation. But it's certainly one of the big things I hear very often is sort of 2 or 3 weeks after a fit, people will come back to me and say, "Oh, I'm just not able to hold the same power." They effectively come out of the studio and put their TT bike on the turbo and are riding indoors and tracking their power, and they're disappointed that they can't hold the same power as they can on the road bike, and that is nearly always the case, particularly if you're untrained in the position, that your actual power numbers will drop in the first instance. But I always say, my reply to that is always to persuade people to just go outside and do some riding outside and test outside, and you'll soon realize that actually you're going much quicker if you're in a good position and you're in a nice aero position. Your speed should increase significantly on the TT bike over a road bike, regardless of where your power is. So that's something I try and reassure people. I'd say it's pretty rare for somebody's TT power output to be the same as their road, and obviously the more you train on your TT bike, the closer that will come. Yeah,
it's a really good point actually, that people are going to have often significantly different power outputs in the TT position to the road bike, and it's an issue that we see quite often where people have trained on the road bike all winter and then they jump on the TT bike for a test session and then go and race and say, I was 30 or 40 watts off where I was on that, I just couldn't put the power out. And then you look at the speed they were doing and they're going really quickly, and it's that trade-off of sort of different muscular firing patterns and recruitment in the TT bike position means they're not putting as much raw power down, but they're going much quicker for the power they are. And it's almost like their FTP needs to be different for the two bikes, or is different for the two bikes, and people need to realize that.
Yeah, exactly. As I say, it's a race to the finish in terms of speed, not who's putting out the most power. And really, I always remember Sam Baxter from our team, who was on the team for a couple of years, and 2 or 3 years, and he was twice the fastest British age grouper in Kona, and he was a bike monster. I think he rode 4:38 or something in Kona one year.
Wow.
And he used to boast about how low his power was, and I always thought that was a great way of looking at things. Is clearly the more aero you are and the less power you're putting down, the better you're going to run. So I thought it was it's the complete opposite of the way I see most people in their race reports sort of overstating their power. He was very proud of how low his power was.
Yeah. My old coach used to say the thing with the power meter is when you get it, you've read a few articles online and a few blogs, and the thing you've got to remember is that the recording bias, that people only ever blog about the best workouts, and it's only ever really strong men that are blogging about them anyway. And so it's easy to look at the numbers and go, well, I'm putting out 160 watts as a middle-aged female, and I seem to be going pretty well, and I'm reading about these plus 300 watt rides, and it's not always the reality, isn't always what you read in somebody's blog, I think.
No. And I think people are generally shocked. I remember Pete Jacobs published his power data after he won Kona, and I from my memory tells me he averaged 270 watts.
That's right, yeah.
For the bike leg, which actually is try holding 270 watts for 4.5 hours. It's hard, but actually it's probably lower than most people would expect to win Kona.
Yeah.
I think and then I read age group blogs of people holding it apparently over 300 watts, and you think, well, either you're 100 kilos or you're putting too much into your bike leg.
You're wearing a parachute along the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so let's talk a little bit then about Team Freespeed, which is the sort of elite age group team that you put together, and talk us through how presumably that grew out of your bike fitting business.
Well, it's interesting. It was 2010. That was the year that I started the bike fitting business, and in October 2010, my wife actually, Jenny, was racing Kona. She'd qualified for Kona, and 3 friends in the local area were also racing, and they were all members of clubs in London, of triathlon clubs in London, but felt that they were racing at a level that perhaps it would be fun to do something on a more like a team, effectively a sort of amateur team, and it was an idea that was hatched really in a pub, I think, and they agreed,
like all the best ideas,
very kindly to race under the name Team Freespeed, and at that point we didn't have any sponsorship at all, but the 4 of them raced in Kona that year. So Stuart Anderson was the fastest British age group of that year in 2010, and then Declan Doyle was a couple of minutes behind him. They did sort of 9:15 and 9:17, I think, and then Tim Bishop did just under 9:30, I think, that year. So it was a pretty successful start, although Jenny actually ended up in hospital with a DNF, but that's another story. So from there, really, we came back to London, and I remember we all met for dinner and said, look, should we is this a one-off, or should we take it further? And we decided it'd be fun to take it further. And we actually, one of the things we decided to do there and then, and it's something we've stuck to ever since, is to only approach sponsors who we like, we love their products and would like to be ambassadors for their products. It's not just an exercise in collecting sponsors. We sat down and said, well, actually, the guys have all got decent jobs. They can afford their own energy bars. But if we were going to represent an energy bar company, who would it be? And Cliff Bar were very much at the top of that list. And in fact, they were the only name on the list because everyone was using Cliff Bars. And we approached Cliff Bar and they said yes. So we're now into our, 6th or 7th year of sponsorship by Cliff Bar, and they've been fantastic. And that's pretty much all the way through has been the standard that we've set ourselves with sponsors. We've approached the sponsors we want to work with, and have actually rejected is probably a bit strong a word, but we haven't entertained sponsors that have approached us who with products that we just don't really believe we can credibly represent. So I like to think we've gone about that the right way, and we've managed to keep most of our sponsors for several years, and are also not chopping and changing every year with different sponsors.
Yeah, and one of the team sponsors is also a sponsor of our show, Precision Hydration. So I'd imagine that their product is especially useful for your guys when they go out to race in the heat in Kona, right?
It's brilliant, yeah. We love the guys there, and Andy Blow, one of the founders, approached me pretty much, I think, even before the product was launched, to see if we were interested. And he knew that our team is rightly or wrongly very much focused around Kona. Every year, that's part of our invitation requirement is if you want to be on the team, you have to have some level of focus on Kona, and so obviously Kona is a race where getting your hydration and your electrolyte balance right is incredibly important, and I was intrigued by the product, and we sent some samples out to the guys, and they all loved it and loved the concept of being just a little bit more scientific about electrolyte intake for hot races. And yeah, it's worked very well for us. And I think the other thing is that, you know, it's we try and work with sponsors who are fun to work with, and the guys at Precision Hydration are just brilliant. We recently did the again, a couple of the team did the Otillo race in Scilly Isles, and the guys, Andy and a couple of the other guys from Precision Hydration were out there, and it's fair to say we had a great time out there.
Nice. And if any of the listeners are interested in, you know, I think a lot of the people who listen to the show secretly harbour a desire to think, oh, I'd love to race at that level, and it'd be great to be sponsored, and it'd be great to be on a team like Team Freespeed. Do you have like an application process every year, or how do people go about sort of being interested with you, or is it a case that you approach athletes that have caught your eye?
It's a bit of both. We often have names that we're hoping will apply. They've caught our eye and done particularly well and have real potential. But occasionally, well, every year somebody comes out of the woodwork who perhaps isn't on our radar and through the application process and is very interesting. So we invite applications generally towards the end of the year in around November, December, and then we set the standard very high, and that's for two reasons. We ask that anybody applying should have the potential to podium in Kona now in their age group. Now, I think most, you know, if we said have the potential to qualify for Kona, that I think most people feel that with a following wind, and if they have a perfect day and it rolls down to some 35th place, that they may qualify for Kona one day. And there's, you know, that's absolutely fine. But I think in our minds, we're looking for something a bit more than that, and we're looking for people who can actually genuinely be competitive in Kona, and that's a real step up. You know, I raced in Kona once, and in 2006, and for me, getting to Kona was it really. I was, you know, getting there was my success. Actually, being competitive when you're there is a whole another ball game, and our athletes, we've really done well over the years. We've had, I believe, 10 podiums now in 6 years in Kona, including an overall female win, female amateur win, and we've had several second places. Alison Rowett has now come second 3 times, so she's
due to win, isn't
provided
she?
3 of those podiums. So it's something we're really lucky in that we do attract the top amateur racers in the country to our team, and I think it's a credit to our sponsors and the package we're able to put together for people racing on the team. They really do get excellent support. We've got Skechers, our main sponsor at the moment, and Orca and Cliff Bar I mentioned, and Precision Hydration, and as well as a few other minor sponsors who are fantastic, and the team really do get an amazing package, including some financial help towards their racing, and particularly again the focus there is around helping with flights to Kona and so on. So it's I've certainly spoken to a few pros who have said they'd quite like the support that our team athletes get. So I know we're doing something right on that level.
You're definitely doing something right there. It sounds like the dream package, doesn't it, really? So on the back of that, you mentioned in an email to me that you've been helping a little bit with the management of Kat Foe and Lucy Charles recently. So I was interested to hear your take on, I mean, we often have pros on and talk to them about essentially the difficulty of making a living as a pro triathlete, and your move in sort of starting to manage athletes like this seems like a really smart one, because you've got your elite age group team, and it seems like not a massive stretch to think you could have some kind of pro team all under the same banner almost, and that might not be your aim, but certainly having someone who's experienced in business negotiating deals for the pros lets them get on with the racing and the training rather than thinking about how they're going to make the next sponsorship deal, I suppose. So could you tell us a little bit about that and how that's come about, please?
Sure. Well, that really came about on two levels. One was I'm very friendly with a guy, Evan Gallagher, in Australia, who runs a management team called BPM Athlete Management, and under his roster, he's got Holly Lawrence, Tim Reed, Caroline Stephan, Flora Duffy, so several really tier one pro athletes, and it's something we've spoken about for a few years that perhaps I could help him out with some athletes in Europe and under his banner, and that's something I've always quite liked the idea of. And Kat was the natural start point for that, because Kat had been on our team and she had won the amateur race in Kona and actually finished with the 10th fastest time that year overall in Kona. So Kat's a phenomenal athlete, and I think her story is fairly well known. She took a 2-year sabbatical to do her junior doctor training and then turned pro last year. So I helped her make that transition from amateur to pro, and she then went and won at Ironman Vichy in her first pro race, and unfortunately has been injured ever since, and is on the way back with rehab now, but really had developed a stress fracture in that race that is being very annoyingly slow to heal. So we're fingers crossed everything's going in the right direction, but it also demonstrates well the fragility of earning your living in pro sports. So Kat is back working at the moment, and hoping, as I say, all fingers crossed that things come right to get back to doing what she loves.
A bit of a plug
but in the
here.
meantime,
You can
Lucy
listen to Kat's
is
story
somebody.
I was just going to say, sorry, mate, a little bit of a plug. You can listen to Kat's story on episode 90 of our podcast if you go back into the archive. So one for the listeners there. Sorry, man, carry on.
Perfect, that's all right. So then Lucy, I noticed early this year that Lucy was riding an unbranded bike. Obviously, Boardman have seemingly pulled out of triathlon and dropped all their triathlon athletes, including the Brownleys. Yeah. And Lucy had Brucey, that might be her new nickname. Lucy had stickered over the Boardman stickers on her bike and was riding an unbranded bike. And actually, the first couple of races this year were shockingly good. I felt really
amazing.
Certainly turned my head. And so I put a call into Lucy and offered to help her with her management, and she said yes, she was struggling a little bit, and so that's something we've been doing now for the last 3 or 4 months, and is really we're moving in some very exciting directions there. Got some really good potential sponsors on the horizon, and honestly, that is all down to Lucy's incredible hard work over the winter to go from where she was this time last year to where she is now, and she is a genuine contender on a world stage, and I think people are recognizing that now, and certainly sponsors are recognizing it, that she could be. She's 23 years old, so she could be a Kona world champion. I've got absolutely no doubt about that in the fairly near future as well. So.
And she's probably got a 15-year career in front of her as well still, if she stays injury free. She's a tremendous talent, and the step forward she's made, especially with the biking over this past year, is quite phenomenal, isn't it?
It really is, and I think her potential is it's hard to know, because I don't think there's a precedent for a 23-year-old racing at this level in long distance racing. I don't think we've seen it before.
Yeah.
Obviously the danger is injury and doing too much too soon at an early age. But on the other hand, Lucy and Reese, her fiance, are both personal trainers. They both do a lot of strength and conditioning. They're incredibly fit, come from a long history of top level sport in swimming. So, my sense is they're doing things the right way, and it's certainly on their mind that they're looking for a long career in the sport. So it's really exciting to see where she can go.
definitely is. Hey, well, listen, I think that brings us pretty much to the end of our interview. Thank you very much for taking the time to come on the show, and I think you've given us a lot of really good points firstly about Bike Fit, and secondly about sponsorship and your team that are really going to help a lot of people out. So just to wrap it up, if people are interested in coming down to see you and getting help with their Bike Fit and their bike position, the website is freespeed.co.uk, isn't it?
That is it. Yeah, absolutely.
And whereabouts are you based in London?
I'm based just on the outskirts of London, on the west side. So it's real triathlon and cycling central around here. I'm in Teddington, West London, so I'm just over Kingston Bridge, and it's really pretty much the whole of West London seems to cycle on a weekend and come this way out to the Surrey Hills. So we're very close to Richmond Park. We're close to Hampton Pool. We're a couple of 100 meters from Bushy Park, where Park Run started. So it's really, really well located here for triathlon. So
great stuff. So if people are in the area, get yourself down and check it out. All right, thank you very much for your time, Richard. It's been great to talk to you, and we wish you and all of your athletes all the best for a really successful season.
Well, thank you so much. Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
All right, good guy. Really liked him and enjoyed talking to him. And there's some really good nuggets in there in that interview from him. I think that'll really help people get more comfortable on the bike.
And Rob, I genuinely am a big believer in bike fits and getting someone like Richard to look at your position and modify, make a few tiny little changes here and there to make you as comfortable. And if it's not just comfort, it's efficient as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the really good points that he makes, is lots of people do bike fits, but he's a triathlon specific bike fitter. And the position on the bike is going to be very different for triathlon than other sports, than time trialing, for example, for a very good reason. And I think I really like this idea that he kept saying, I don't think I'm the best bike fitter in the world, but I'm very experienced at fitting triathletes, and what we do works for people. So someone who's got that kind of experience working with lots of triathletes, rather than, I hear a lot of stories from the local bike shop of people who've been set up by road cyclists or time trialists to ride as a time trialist would do, and it's just not as efficient or comfortable as it could be.
Yeah, because the main difference is they don't have to run off the bike. And yeah. that is one of the main things. You find it's all very well being comfortable on the bike, but then are you in the best position to be able to, I don't know, run a 10K, run a half marathon, or run a
full marathon,
a full marathon off that bike?
Yeah, good.
So,
all right. So let's jump over into our news section. What's been going on in the world this week, Hells?
Well, if you fancy Bolton and, me potentially cheering you on in Bolton, always an option, then entries are open for next year. But the other thing, Rob, is that Bolton is going to be the home of Ironman UK for another 5 years, because I think there was a little bit of doubt or uncertainty. Perhaps things hadn't quite been signed off, or maybe they were just keeping it under wraps until Ironman UK this year, and then we're going to make this announcement that it's going to be staying there. So entries are open for next year's event.
Brilliant.
And what's quite interesting is that they are introducing two things. One is a deferral option, which is, it's almost like finally they've listened rather than snapping up all your money. So anyone who registers on or before the 29th of October are eligible to defer their race entry to the 2019 event free of charge.
Ooh.
Yeah, and all deferral requests will be honoured until 45 days before that race day in July, regardless of the reason for deferral.
That's really good, isn't it?
Yeah. So I thought
that's a real positive move. Yeah, I really like that.
And then the other thing, which I think is good that they've done, is, we know this sport is not cheap. And then when you have to pay, £400 for an Ironman race entry, that's a big chunk of money, a big chunk of anyone's paycheck, isn't it? So they are introducing a payment plan option for athletes who register again on it before the 29th of October. And
nice.
It's a 3-part payment plan, and you'll have 3 equal instalments. So I thought that was quite a good change, Rob. A welcome move.
Yeah, it's all good stuff for the athletes. I think that's what's most important. If it works better for the athletes,
definitely.
Really impressed with that.
Because when you pay that, when you've paid up, you're like, oh, can't really buy anything else.
It's a
this month.
huge chunk of money to pay out all in one go, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah. So that's great. So that's cool. Then the other one about big events staying or going or whatever is that the championship, which took place in Slovakia for the first time this year, it was the Challenge Championship, and it was really good. So that is going to stay in Samorin in Slovakia for the next 3 years. So that's pretty awesome too. I saw Lionel Sanders tweet something along the lines of, great, that's me sorted, I'm heading back. He was a big fan because of the 20-meter drafting rule, which he then felt, well, you got a fair race through that. So yeah, Lionel Sanders, definite fan of that news.
Great stuff, love it. And the other bit of news just to mention is that Lucy Charles continued her winning streak down in the Half Challenge Prague this weekend. So congratulations to her. She's having a brilliant season, isn't she?
Yep, definitely. She really is. So I guess now all attention on that big day in October. That race, Rob, in Prague sounds amazing. The transitions on one of the main bridges across the across the river, and you go over it, and it was like closed traffic and everything. So yeah, it sounded quite a cool race that Challenge put on in Prague, and very well organised.
Photos were stunning. Yeah, really beautiful.
Yeah, I wonder how many. I just remember doing the Half Challenge Peguera, and you'd be riding through Magaluf, and there'd be all like these, beer holiday makers, let's say, on the beers. And I wonder if you'd have the same in Prague, if you'd have a few stag do's, getting all excited about these people in Lycra whizzing past.
Yeah, not quite the same as that, I don't think, but
you never know.
You never know, do you? Bring back Ironman Blackpool.
Oh my goodness.
Can you imagine? Oh dear. It was always my favourite marathon, that running the Blackpool Marathon on the Sunday morning, and there'd be people still coming. It seemed like, I don't know how they'd be coming out of bars still, but definitely doing the walk of shame along the promenade, still drunk. Always people coming onto the course and running alongside you, and wearing the smart outfit from the night before.
That's brilliant.
Oh dear. Okay, well, we suppose we better wrap it up for this week then, hadn't we? Thanks very much for listening, everybody. You've been listening to the Oxygenaddict Triathlon Podcast. I'm Rob Wilby.
I'm Helen Murray.
And yeah, thanks very much for listening. Tune in next week. Best of luck with your training and racing this week, and we will speak to you again next week. See ya.